Helo a croeso I sesiwn sydd Gâr Greadigol. Melanie ydw I a heddiw yn ymuno gyda fi ydy Dai Butcher o Orchard Media and Events. Mae croeso I chi ymuno ar sgwrs os ydych chi eisiau wrth popio cwestiwn yn y bocs. Hello and welcome to this Sydd Gâr Greadigol event. My name is Melanie Owen and today joining me is Dai Butcher from Orchard Media and Events. If you want to get involved in the discussion, then please do pop a question in the box. Dai, thank you so much for joining us here today. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
Absolutely great, thank you. So, first of all, would you just kind of give us a little bit of a background into Orchard, what you do, how it kind of came about?
Yeah, so Orchard has been going for, we had our 10-year anniversary of the current branding recently, but have been kind of built out of multiple different offerings. So we cover everything from production to TV ads, film and TV series, to advertising, media buying, PR, events, exhibitions, creative. I head up the team in the digital side, so we cover off the websites, apps, and immersive technology. So that's my specialism.
So immersive technology, for somebody who's never heard of it, what is it?
So you've got a few different types, and it depends on what you're talking about. So we cover virtual reality, so that's headset-based replacement of your view with computer-generated imagery or video. We cover augmented reality, which is the bringing computer-generated imagery into the real world, and then we have things like XR, MR, which are kind of bigger terms that probably won't get a chance to cover off today.
Absolutely. So how do you incorporate that then into your services? So who would you be offering that to, for instance?
Well, I think, taking the three there that we've got, so 360 video, virtual reality and augmented reality, they kind of cover off a few things.
Yeah.
So there could be a business need for orientation and familiarization of a premises, to communicating quite difficult subjects that traditional mediums just don't. We need to immerse someone to get them to really understand what that is, and that's where things like 360 video and virtual reality can be really helpful.
Excellent. So do you find that there is like a growing call for that now that people know that there are people like you out there doing it? Do you find that there is a little bit of a demand there?
Yeah, I think that we've, over the last sort of 5 to 10 years, there has been a big movement towards how do we engage with people better, you know, from data becoming a big subject, and how do we optimize experiences for users and for people. And we're getting very clear data now to show how to deliver a message in a better way to an audience, and that's become a creative process. How we interpret data and how we use that data has been quite interesting. And then immersive then has come back in, probably in the last 5 years, has become something a bit more normal. And that's helping to tell very complicated stories and gain empathy with audiences that we previously struggled to get that kind of content out. It's very directed at you and how it's delivered. And so there's lots of businesses using it.
Yeah, so this empathy training I find absolutely fascinating, and I can only imagine that it's becoming more and more relevant. I mean, how do you go about offering that to businesses? Like who would be looking for it, and how would you kind of really incorporate it into the service that you're giving them?
I think when you've got kind of difficult subjects to talk about, or you've got a very specific audience that you're trying to communicate to, I think it can be quite difficult to understand someone's position. You know, and otherwise everyone says, if you could stand in someone's shoes and kind of take on that position, and that's where immersive tech has come in. I mean, you can never replace experience for someone, but you can help them to understand a narrative that they previously wouldn't have been there. So we've started implementing things like empathy training so we've worked with ITV recently, doing some projects on that. We've been working with applying that logic to people like the AA, so we've been doing some driver instructor training with them, but also educational pieces. So how do we take an audience with no knowledge to a point where they have enough knowledge and understand, sometimes it's the risks of a situation, but sometimes it's how do we understand the position that someone is in, which I think in this day and age has become more important than anything that we are doing creatively, is to try and communicate those messages. And there are so many messages that really need that extra step to get some people to understand them. So
you know, to somebody like me who's a bit of a layman with this, it would see that there would be an obvious correlation between there's a growing social consciousness of needing to put yourself in other people's shoes, especially decision makers. Like you detailed that you'd worked with ITV and so on. Obviously, you know, people will have seen in the news and things like that, when it comes to reality TV, decision makers are having to really consider, you know, potentially life-threatening decisions that they could be making, or if they don't quite get their job right, there could be really awful consequences. Have you seen that correlation between that social consciousness growing and the demand for what it is that you're providing?
Definitely. I think where we started with VR, so trying to take it back a little bit further, I think everyone had an experience of VR 5-6 years ago that was poor. I think everyone jumped in, whether it was a roller coaster or it was a really badly shot 360 video. Everyone had a chance to have a go with that. Some people loved it and moved into the industry that I'm in. And that for some of us, that was, oh, this could be amazing. It wasn't necessarily, this is amazing, this could be amazing. And for some people, it was, this is not good enough, I'm not interested. And so the market is slowly moving now to a position where people can see that the technology has got far enough, the education within our industry, and we know now what works, whereas we didn't 5 or 6 years ago. We were still testing how things were going to pan out. We've got to a point now where we can see that the technology really has a benefit. And so it's slowly becoming more normal in the industry. Every time that we get someone in a room and we can show them something like the ITV project, or more recently we did something with the Royal Mint around the Mr. Men.
Oh, okay.
You know, you get someone into that kind of position, you can see that there are sometimes different ways, sometimes better ways to communicate a message.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're almost at the forefront of something that in a decade could be really quite normal and expected, you know, even within non-creative industries? So, you know, could you imagine like a HR department of a company incorporating this type of empathy training using VR to kind of better understand the staff's needs or something like that?
Yes, we worked on a project a couple of years ago that was around that. It was actually around the HR side of things, and taking that idea of how do we better train in the creative industry to, again, it was empathy, but it was empathy for the audience. So when you're presenting something to an audience, how can you better train in that industry to really understand how many times you're saying and how many times you're saying like, and how many, you know, and gamify that process to an extent to get people to retrain in how they deliver things. I think that there's big scope now, and in the next probably 10 years, we're going to see huge jumps in technology, and that'll be where things start to really switch over. When we start seeing good working smart glasses, where we can paint that image on people's eyes and it's a piece of tech that they're comfortable wearing and it doesn't look as ridiculous as some of the headsets do.
Yeah.
But they can wear that on a day-to-day basis. When we start seeing that kind of technology come in, we'll start seeing this technology becoming just a normal format, just something we're used to seeing. But it is becoming more normal now. Do
you predict that development in the technology, the advancement, is going to move quite quickly?
Yeah, I think Facebook are very close to launching the smart glasses. Their employees are all actually wearing them at the moment and testing them. So that's going to probably be in the next 18 months. We'll see that. Apple have been threatening theirs for about 4 years. So that will drop in the next 18 months as well, I would have thought. And that will then, being Apple, it will become a fashion accessory. It will become normal. So, yeah. We'll
all be walking around the streets with these on, do you think, living in another kind of parallel universe, possibly?
Well, maybe not quite that yet, but I think things like, you know, augmented reality, which we haven't really talked a little bit about, but that will become very normal. So directions in your day-to-day, you know, you'll put your sat-nav on and see the arrows on the floor. We will see that in the next probably 2 years.
Really? That is very, very interesting. So how would you say, for anybody who's listening to this and is thinking, this is exactly what I want to do, I want to be a part of this, how does somebody go about that?
A lot of research. I think that it's sort of counterintuitive for a lot of the stuff that we do in creative. And that was what I loved about it, was that, you know, if we work in production, the first thing you're told is, you know, don't spike the lens, unless we're doing a kind of situation like this, where you do kind of look directly into the camera. But when working in 360, we have to get all of the actors to forget everything that they've ever known. You are looking at that camera is now a person, because you have to get that eye contact. So there's an element there of taking a lot of experience that these creatives have and all of those ideas and bringing them into the space. I think that we have a big opportunity in that space because it's actually quite sparse at the moment. There's lots of people interested, but there is so much scope for where we can be with it, that bringing people in with different visions, different excitements, different ways of communicating will drag the industry in a direction that at the moment it's filled with, or less so now, but maybe 5 years ago, it was filled with a very specific type of person who was interested in something that currently doesn't quite work, and how can I push this further? And I think that it's that mindset of, I want to do something different. I want to do something that's that I can learn throughout. It's not a straightforward process, which is, I find very exciting. It's doing something innovative every time.
Absolutely. Is there any kind of educational path that would be kind of ideal for somebody who's maybe a little bit younger, who's thinking, right, okay, this is definitely my path. I'm very creative, I'm innovative, I've got all these ideas, I'm going to drive this industry forward. Is there a kind of educational route yet? Or is it that it's so new that education hasn't caught up yet?
I think that you can separate VR, especially if we ignore AR for a second, because it kind of works the same. But if you separate off VR into its kind of components, you've got the kind of filming side, so editing, and of that side, the actual filming technical process. There are courses that you can go off and do that, which is applicable within the side. There's a slight maybe jump that you've got to take to get into 360 editing. There are some differences there, but the core fundamentals of that are the same. You've got the 3D side of things. Well, obviously that's the same path that you would take with animation, you would take with game development, you would take, so there is a huge amount of things that you can do on that side. And then there is, to go in the empathy direction, so if we were looking at that specific kind of industry I'm kind of moving more in at the moment, and the thing that I'm really passionate about, I mean, that's taking the skills that you get from those other courses and just saying, I want to make a difference. I want to be part of the solution. And we won't get there all the time. Some stuff we put out will work, some of it won't. But I think that we can have, it opens a dialogue that maybe wasn't possible before.
Absolutely, yeah. So creativity linked with social change, the excellent example of this. Talking of the educational side of things, or the things that you could do in preparation to getting involved, is this the kind of background that you had initially? No.
So I came from I'm a nerd.
We all are.
So, I mean, anything to do with computers was something I was fascinated by with my coming through education. But I was a musician. That was the creative side for me. And so the emotion of music was always the bit that I really loved. And it was always I was less interested in being the most technically, proficient guitarist or drummer or singer. I was more interested in trying to play the sound and try and get a different thing out of it. And I think that my course from there was sort of nerd in the background, music, and then I looked at, well, I have to have a career in something. And so I'd moved into education in some ways. That was my first kind of dip in that direction, applying what I was doing. So my first job was actually teaching music and taking that side of things into education. But my traction came when I started going, well, actually what I really like doing is I like finding creative solutions to problems. And so I went into digital marketing and worked with a company based in Swansea with quite UK-wide clients there. And I slowly moved into VR and found my niche there. But I think having a basis in any creative is good enough to do that. It's just then taking that side step to say, well, where can I apply the thing that I love? And I think it's finding the bit about being creative that you love and finding where that application can be sidestepped into so that you still love your job. And I think that's really important for anyone who's decided that they're going to train to do something creative.
Yes. I often, I work in a creative industry. I'm part of like a blogging world, and still I have that feeling of I can't feel like I can call it work yet. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I feel like I enjoy this too much to call it work. Yeah. But isn't that the beauty of the creative industries? And I think creative industries is a huge umbrella term, isn't it? Yeah. But isn't that the beauty of it, that if you find your niche, if you find what it is that you enjoy doing, and you can monetize that, which can be done, evidently.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's not always the direction that you think you're going to go in. I think the training and getting that thought process nailed down, whether that's in music or it's in 3D or it's in editing, getting that the ability to take a project through its steps is something that has to be learned. But how you apply that into spaces like immersive or like video, or art, and monetize that, I think that that's unique to you. And that's where I feel in immersive, don't try and drag anyone in that direction, but there's such an open space right now for creativity, for me taking those risks and trying to push it further and further than we've gone before, so far.
We've had a really relevant question in that regard as to when you are a creative and you go into business, how difficult did you find bridging between the two?
There was a lot of research.
Yeah.
I think that was probably the hardest bit, was getting up to date with what this was. Not just I enjoy playing games, but how do I take that love of playing games with what I did here? And bridging those gaps was difficult, but I ended up going much more down the scientific route rather than the creative route with that, and started reading a lot of research put out by various different universities, predominantly in America, around presence, how to create presence with users, how to engage users, I did a lot on UI, and that was kind of then married that up with my creative side and dragged it back into that direction. So I think that there is an element of luck in some ways with everything, but I think that if you've got the right mindset for it, I think it's finding that passion.
Absolutely, and I think that's so relevant, even with, in regards to this question when you're asking about, with the business side, even if you're not a creative, so to speak, but you are going into the business, if you have that passion for it and that is your niche and that's what you're interested in, like you said, you found, like your 360, you found your VR, and you were like, okay, this is my niche now. Yeah. Things will fall into place, won't they? Because you want them to. You were keen for them to. And if you find it and you enjoy it, then even on those really bad days and those days where like, why am I doing this? Oh yeah, it reminds you why, doesn't it?
Especially working with new technology, and we work on projects that there is a specific project that was we were 72 hours in. I think we slept for about 2 hours during that weekend because the tech is so new. Things didn't work. Things broke. And we had to find solutions because delivery date was the Monday. Yeah. We'd come in on the Friday. And everything is broken. And I loved that because that was finding new territory, and actually the lack of sleep, you get used to it. But
it drives you that little bit. A bit perverse, but it drives you, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But it's interesting and it's different. Yeah. But I think it's the passion. I don't think that you have to train to some degree to understand the industry, but I think it's about how much you love it is whether you'll get it. Absolutely. And if you live and breathe it, and you find that niche and that thing that really makes you happy in it, I think anyone can find their way into that.
Absolutely. Diversifying creativity to create change is something that a lot of creatives do look about, because if you are socially conscious or you are creative, those things do tend to marry up, don't they?
Yeah.
Do you think that do you have any advice as to anybody who wants to diversify their creativity to bring about social change?
I think people are fundamentally good. I think that's where I've come to in my life, and I didn't believe that 15 years ago. But I definitely believe it now. It's people fundamentally good, and people make bad decisions. And I think if you can apply that logic to across the board to everything and say, well, this is an information thing. This person was not born to believe the things that they believe, or they're just not educated in whatever that subject may be. And so we can pull people in that direction. And creativity, I think, is fundamental to how we do that, how we communicate with people, finding a way to bridge that gap in whatever it is in it. It's going to have to come with creativity, and the creative industry is perfect for that change, and that everyone has we do an exercise with clients on memory. So how do you train someone differently? So we want to do an exercise on think of a moment in your life where you can remember what you could smell, what you could hear, what you could see, what you could taste, what you could... And there are very few examples that anyone can do all of that. They can say, oh, it was brilliant, I went to here. But there will always be a gig, or there will be a moment in your teen years where you felt awful and you were crying and you can remember the song you were listening to and whatever it might have been. There may be that sort of angst. That's where we apply the sort of that logic back in, is we want to create memorable experiences for people that they can totally empathize, as you can with yourself and my teenage self and the breakup I might have had at 15 or whatever, and I can remember that. I can empathize with how I felt then. As much as I look back at it and go, it really wasn't a big deal, I can empathize with myself, and I think that's where we can communicate really, really nicely through this
and that's
space.
going to be key to marketing as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everything, is engagement. And, if we look at a very, in a simplistic level, like social media content, that which is authentic is always the one that engages the best, isn't it? Because people feel that emotional connection. So in a way, what you're doing is just a step up from that, isn't it, really? But making people feel that emotional connection. Yeah,
we're just trying to be honest with the stories, and there are tricks that we have to do. We have soundtracks, and we have things like raising heartbeats and things that will play very quietly in the background. So if we're trying to get the person to do something, or if we're trying to relax someone, we have a side of the business in Orchard that are a separate company called Rescape, which is all about distraction therapy for reduction of pain. Using VR as a subject, but all the techniques are the same. Maybe we might reverse them on my side than they do. They try and reduce everyone's anxiety, whereas I might have a subject where I need someone to feel anxious. So we're trying to boost that a little bit. But it's taking everything we learn across all of the other creative industries through film and through art, and applying that into this sphere now to get an emotional reaction, which then leads to, not always change, but at least leads to more information on the subject and a bit of a better feel for what we're going to do next, and why someone feels the way they do. Even if you don't agree with it, at least understanding why. And that's the most difficult bit we have in society at the moment, is communicating those differences.
When you're going about creating that, do you enjoy working by yourself? Are you one of these creatives who is like, I need my space, I need to be able to concentrate, or do you bounce off other team members?
A bit of both. So it depends on what subject we were on. I tend to work quite closely with the client. If there's a story to tell, I can try and empathise, but that's why I might go and rent a load of films on the subject or listen to music that's about that subject and try and get myself into the headspace of that. But the client generally wants to tackle that subject because they already have that empathy. And so I'll work with them quite a lot. But I tend to, the final storyboard before we go into the teams of how we're going to do this and the scripting, that will tend to be done on my own. That tends to be take all of that I've had from someone else, lock myself in a room and try and feel that story.
So you've taken, all the kind of the material that you got from that kind of collaboration, and then when you're on your own, you can then apply it by yourself. Yeah,
and start looking at the techniques we have then. What applies? Things like raising heartbeat, does that apply anywhere here? Does this, the score, how's that going to be? Which is always a really important one to me.
Yes.
It's obviously the music in it.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, so how are we going to do those things? And whether we do put a score in, because obviously we're trying to fake reality, you don't tend to have music everywhere that you're going. So how subtly that can be put in without, having a soundtrack to this person's life, which is quite an odd situation. But we do find it works better, which seems to be counterintuitive. We're trying to get reality. The music shouldn't really be there, but it seems to work better. So.
Yes, it's all, like you say. I think we all like to think, what would the soundtrack to my life be? I think mine's a lot more chirpy than probably the reality is. I've always thought a bit of Earth, Wind and Fire, something like that, a bit of September, but I'm not that happy a person normally, actually.
No, so. I'm definitely a much more miserable
bit of Coldplay in the background.
Damien Rice, maybe.
Exactly, whatever works. And people empathise with that, though. That's the thing, isn't it? Finally, profit with a purpose. Do you feel like that is the forefront in most creatives' minds when they are starting up?
Yeah, I think everyone younger. So if we just say that creatives starting up and we apply age to that rather than, and obviously people get into it later in life. But I think we all go into the world hoping money's not the important thing, it's making a change. And we just talked about, for me, making change is a really big thing. But obviously, applying we have to earn from it, we have to make a living, we have to do that side of things. So if you can marry the two things, find something that you love that you can make a profit out of, but you are still affecting that change. And I would always say, pick the change over the money. If you can make a real difference, and that's what we try to apply in Orchard. And we work with, the NHS quite a lot, and we work with a lot of clients that maybe we reduce the budgets a little bit, just to make sure that we can still work with that client. I do think that it's important to find the balance, but I think that if you're a creative, change is definitely what you want. You want emotional effect with what you're delivering, and that's what art is about.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dai, for joining me today. It's been so motivational. I'm sure loads of people have picked up lots of tips as well, and I'll come back to you when we're all wandering around with those glasses on the street. I will think of you. Thank you so much to everybody who has joined. Diolch yn fawr, a mi fydd ni nôl wythnos nesaf gyda Rhydyn Patel. Diolch yn fawr.